this is proof right here, guys. If you're watching this, you will not meet nicer people. Whoops, I'm going to point there and there. You will not meet nicer people.
Coming back to a show that I dearly love and admire. So thanks for having me.
It's like, that's Big Starklighter's helmet. So how did you know? Because I'm a nerd.
I've placed information vital to the survival of the rebellion into the memory systems of this R2 unit.
But, I was doing my research, and Wedge was obviously a character that you had to use if you were going to do Rogue Squadrons.
What are you doing, C-3PO? I'm taking one last look at my friends. These aren't your friends.
Cassie and Jim and the teacher, people are like, no. I can literally hear people that go, no.
It doesn't look like they're even hungry when they get out. They're not just like, did you bring a Snickers or something? There's no logic to it. And then later, we haven't even talked about the Wilford Brimley of it all.
The same thing. Sears never left me again. We're such soulmates that her being older and me being older was exactly where we were meant to be.
Because Darth Vader was the scariest thing that had ever happened to anybody, and this guy literally looks like the devil.
You or you don't. There is no trying.
What's the big question people have? Like, what's the thing everybody's wondering about? What's the thing I don't understand? What would I want to hear?
The galaxy isn't growing to push people out. It's growing to let more people come in and find their love so that it's able to continue and create this connective tissue.
It's good to know that people still love it out there and that the people who made it are all proud and passionate about it and willing to come back.
It was a mess, dude. I had to wear a patch for a bit. We went to see Star Wars that night because I said, no, I'm going. We have to go. And I went to see Star Wars with a huge thing on my eye.
I like to denote people as daddies from time to time. And I believe that you are a certified daddy. Like Pedro Pascal's a daddy. Like, certified daddy.
I have had the best time ever on Around the Galaxy. Thank you so much.
Well, good evening. We are talking to Kyra Navarrete. Kyra, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
I'm great. We're trying to just make it through. We're going into the fall season, and it's starting to feel like I don't know, like the change in the air and the just like, I don't know. There's like a little bit of a different excitement in the fall. I'm a big fan of the fall myself, but I don't know about you. You're in Chicago, which means that means your short summer is over, right?
Yeah. I feel like it's getting longer though every year. Like I feel like our fall season doesn't really get going till the end of September now, October. Yeah. And I feel like before it used to just get way colder sooner. So, that whole global warming thing going on, might have heard about it. But I went to a pumpkin patch Saturday. That's the earliest I've ever went to one. So I'm so ready for fall. It got pretty hot here in July, and I'm ready to segue into that season,
Yeah. It's I don't know. Like for me, like I always think of like the fall. I always think of like new movies and new TV shows, just because like from when we were kids and all that stuff. And so like I always feel like there's also like an excitement around whatever's happening in whatever fandoms and things like that. But Kyra, for the people who may not know you, I was very fortunate to have you reach out to me as we were planning Podathon, which unfortunately this year is delayed because of the strike. And but hopefully we're going to have you when we reschedule it. But you're also friends with our good friends, Father Son Galaxy. But for the people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself and Relatable Nerds.
Okay, so I am a self-proclaimed Star Wars nerd specifically, started out in that realm at a very young age. I was lucky enough to be, at the prime age of like 7 and 8 when the prequels came out. So those are the first Star Wars movies I got to see in theater. And I obviously got to see the first original trilogy at home. And I've just been such a big nerd ever since. I'm really into comic books, really into reading. And lucky enough, growing up in Chicago, I was always around. I had so much access to so many different forms of media. There was comic book stores all around, bookstores, movie theaters. And I think very early on, that was my path and I knew it. And, I feel like when I was younger, it was the road less traveled. I think as I get older, it's really cool to see the camaraderie and just it be cool again to, like Star Wars and be a nerd, and people are proud to talk about everything they are just so passionate about. Yep. But Relatable Nerds, I started this podcast like many, many others at the beginning of COVID. Right. We were kind of stuck at home. I'm a bartender. So a lot of my bars, they just shut down. Chicago is pretty crazy with all of the shutdowns. There were not any restaurants open. And my co-host and I were pretty close friends at the bar I was working at. And we would just always gather around with the other servers and bartenders and kind of chat about the Marvel movies, like Infinity Wars and Endgame was coming out around then. And of course, the new Star Wars movies. And a lot of these girls around us were just like, we have no idea what you're talking about, but it's really funny. And lightsabers sound kind of cool now, you know? And of course, it helped that, you know, like Adam Driver was in the movies. A lot of people loved him previously before that. So it started out honestly as more just something to not let us go crazy during COVID. And me and my co-host just bought a Yeti mic, I think off Amazon, taught ourselves how to use GarageBand. I taught myself how to edit all of the YouTube videos we do and the graphic design. And I always say we accidentally took off and it is becoming more and more successful over time. And we're just still constantly like, how did we get here? But yeah, so that's what we're doing now. We do a lot of YouTube, I would say, is our primary outlet right now. We do a lot of trailer reactions. And I mean, the spectrum of nerddom is just like every part of the world, every culture. We cover a lot of like Indian movies and Bollywood TV shows and songs and things like that. And so yeah, that's what I'm doing now with Relatable Nerds, and we are covering a lot of Star Wars shows weekly as well, and we travel to different Comic-Cons across the country. Hopefully internationally soon. Don't want to jinx it, but hopefully soon within the next year.
It's wild how fandom, like, it is kind of cool again. I mean, it's funny you're saying I was 7 years old when I saw the prequels, and I was like, oh, I was 7 years old when I saw A New Hope. So, but it's really interesting because I will say, and I'm really curious about this, and it's always a slightly awkward question, but I think it's important and interesting to get your perspective, because when I was 7 years old, like, Star Wars was just boys. It was just, you know, and not just boys, like the nerdy boys, like me and my friends. And I'll never even forget, like, this is the first time I'm thinking of this is through talking to you. Me and my best friend, we did an 8mm version of Star Wars that we were like, not the whole movie. Like, we chose some scenes that we loved, and my friend literally like scratched the laser bolts on the film. And the little girl across the street that we hung out with thought it was so nerdy. She came over and she ruined all of our sets. And one morning we're like, oh my God. It turns out like she was like the Storm from Phantom Menace that blew apart all our sets. Kimmy was oh man, she ruined it for us. But as I said, like, when we were younger, when I was coming through this, like, Star Wars, it was a boys club. Fandom was a boys club. Comic books, all that stuff. Now, you know, 20 years ago when you first saw Phantom Menace, I guess it was about 2012, almost 25 years ago, 20 years ago.
1998.
Yeah, 99. So geez, wow, it's coming up on 24, 25. But at that time, the audience was different. And it's even more different now. Let me start by asking you this. When you first got into it as a 7-year-old girl, was it a boys club? And what have you seen change over the last 20 years, 2 decades?
It was absolutely a boys club. And I was, like I said, I was always very much a nerd as a little kid too. My dad was my best friend, and he showed me Star Wars and Marvel. And I mean, I would often choose reading, you know, like my Harry Potter books and my comic books over doing this, that, you know, going out with friends. And I think, honestly, now that I'm looking back at that, that might have been a reason, because if I were to go out with the girls that I was friends with as a kid, I mean, nobody ever talked about, wow, did you see that lightsaber battle between, you know, Anakin and Count Dooku? And like, it was just, I was talking a different language, even if I brought it up.
Right.
And it was definitely a boys club, but I give my dad a lot of props because he made it so approachable and so just, he let me have my own journey, you know, with it. And I think because of him just like bringing me into that nerdom and that universe, and just being so proud to have, you know, a daughter who likes Star Wars, which I've seen a lot too as the years have gone on. I think because of that, I was just like, this is cool. Like, he always made me feel like science, space, Star Wars. This is the cool stuff. Like, if you don't like this, you're weird, you know? But it is, I think that's one of my favorite parts now, present day, is seeing all of the strong women within the TV shows, the movies, just all of the girls and women in cosplay, and just how amazing it is to connect with all of these people all around the world. And it honestly feels like it's, quadrupled in size, because I can't even think of one girlfriend I had besides my cousin and then my sister, because I kind of made her like Star Wars, I'm like, you're gonna like this, I can't think of anybody else I could talk to it with, and just have a conversation that would actually go anywhere, because it was so foreign to so many different people.
Yeah. It is really interesting too, because I was last show I was at was Philly Fan Expo, I guess it was, and just honestly, the number it's a 50-50 split of men and women now, and it's so great, and it's not just like 15 years ago. It was like you'd see some poor woman who was like, "Ugh, my boyfriend's dragging me here," and now, like, I'll say, I think I've seen some guys who are like, "Why am I here? What do you want to do this for?" And it's so cool to see, and it's really it's an interesting kind of evolution. Now, you mentioned something about strong female characters, and let's talk a little bit about sort of the way fandom reacts to that. And let me say, do you find that you get any pushback as a female fan? Are you running into any of that sort of is that still an issue for you to face? And then let's get into a little bit the characters themselves, because that seems to be just a frustration point as well.
So yes, I hate to say that there are so many men on the YouTube channel and the podcast that support and have so many conversations with us about Star Wars. But at the same time, there is just the constant misogyny, and, you're a girl, like, just the basic topics that, everybody knows about how women can't do this, women can't do that. And it still happens quite often. A lot of the times I feel like me and my co-hosts have to defend ourselves, especially in the beginning, putting yourself out there on a platform. You're just opening the doors for everybody to judge you, say things about your thought process, say things about the way you grew up and your approach to Star Wars. And everybody just has such a different path and such a journey that it's really hard sometimes when people don't realize that at the end of the day, we all just love this universe. We love this galaxy. Like, why can't we just like be friends and, not be, judgmental of each other? But I would say now, like the first year we had the podcast, it was definitely like challenging to overlook that, because I feel like most of our lives as women who are nerds that like, all of the things we're passionate about, you do kind of have to be on the defense sometimes and defend yourself, because that's just been the common misconception for like, I think the beginning of time, honestly, with all of this nerdy stuff. And it's so incredibly ironic, because there's always been writers and artists just putting in these strong women and intelligent women that can totally hold their own. And I feel like that's just gone over everybody's heads until, the past couple years. But yeah.
Do you think as a YouTuber, so you're much deeper into it than the average fan, do you think how much of it do you think has to do with the fact that kind of this faux outrage leads to it frustrates me when I look at some of the channels that have tremendous numbers, and we're more podcast focused, so we don't really worry too much about our own YouTube numbers, but I do look at the numbers of my friends and those that are out there, and you look at the ones that are oftentimes just getting these ridiculous numbers, and they're based in this really kind of ugly part of fandom. Do you think that is what's keeping it alive? Because like I said, you go to the Fan Expo, whether it's Boston or Philly or whichever one you go to, it's a melting pot of everybody. Whereas online, the gatekeeper, and there's money in gatekeeping, I guess, is what it is.
I think, it's the people behind their screens at home who don't really like get out and try to experience the camaraderie and those Comic-Cons, in general. It's so much easier to be mean and gatekeep and have those negative opinions when you're at a screen at home, like with your dog on your lap and, just very like nobody can get in your zone. Your doors are locked,
Right.
But I feel like, that's something I noticed too, because I was obviously I've been to so many Comic-Cons in the past couple of years, and I got into them late in my life, probably when I was like 25, because I didn't, again, have any friends who wanted to go, and I was a little too scared to go alone. And I feel like once I did experienced that camaraderie, especially this last couple years with the podcast and seeing everybody be so kind. You kind of just start ignoring. I mean, they always tell you ignore all of those negative
Yeah.
comments. Don't give those people any attention. Don't give them the time of day because that feeds into their negativity and that just makes them happy. But as you're saying, those negative opinions in the corners of the internet, that's totally why they still have views. You know, there's always going to be that person that's like, yeah, let's start a hate club instead of a fan club, you know, and I'll never understand it. I really won't.
Yeah. Well, let me pull us out of the negativity and let's talk a little bit about your fandom. You said that you saw Star Wars. Was it Phantom Menace when you were 7 years old?
Yeah. So I did not see it in theaters. I did see Attack of the Clones in theaters. I remember VHSs were still around. If anybody remembers those days. And my mom, it was like a Sunday, my mom went grocery shopping and she brought back the Phantom Menace and she had no idea like what Star Wars was. She was just as like annoyed with my dad being like, oh, whatever, you know, space galaxy stuff. She would fall asleep, but she was always so supportive and passionate of everything I loved. And she was always going to like help me get there if she could. So she just threw the Phantom Menace VHS and like hit me in my back. I'm like, what's this? And I'll just remember I watched it so much that the VHS actually broke from, like, 2 weeks from rewinding it so much.
Yeah.
But I did get to see Attack of the Clones in theaters. And that was one of those first experience in a theaters with my dad that I will never forget about. It literally feels like yesterday. We got the last 2 seats in the house at a very packed opening night theater in Chicago. And these are the days when people would stand up and cheer still in movies.
Yep.
And I'll never forget when, you know, it gets really quiet, all the previews are over. A long time ago in A Galaxy Far Away comes on, you can hear a feather drop. You can hear yourself breathing. I'll never forget. I'm like, oh my God. And then that sound is just so loud. And I looked over at my dad and my dad wasn't even paying attention to me. He's just like freaking out, you know? And everybody stood up and was cheering. Like when Mace Windu walked into that arena and said, this party's over. Everybody got on their feet and were just clapping and cheering. And I jumped up too, because I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is what we do. And that did it for me. You know, like I had people I had full grown adults just high-fiving me and welcoming me into that community. And the rest is really history. You know, it's been a long time for me into the Star Wars fandom.
And was Star Wars the first sort of nerdy fandom that you got into?
100%. Yeah. It was, so my dad showed me, I was always very much into sci-fi and, you know, things of that sort, science classes, stuff when I was younger. And I remember my dad showed me A New Hope and I was just mesmerized by the droids and the creatures and just, you know, just the idea of Luke going out in space. Like a 5-year-old doesn't even know what any of this means, but I was so like into it. Yeah. And my dad was so cool because he never told me any of like what the prequels were going to be, you know, who Palpatine was before. He never told me, you know, about Darth Vader's story and anything like that.
Right.
So he kind of let me figure it all out on my own, even when the prequels came out. So I was kind of clueless because I was only 8 when the prequels were out. I didn't really like read heavy into Star Wars books yet. And I didn't know that much. And so watching all those movies live and realizing the betrayal and Anakin becoming Vader and Pat, just all of that was just, it hit me so hard. And I'm just so glad he never spoiled anything for me. Nowadays, he spoils everything. See a movie because he doesn't really have a lot of friends who are into his nerdy thing too. So he'll go see a Marvel movie. He'll call me like, "Oh my God, so and so died! Like, can you believe it?" I'm like, "Come on, you know I didn't work tonight. Like, I couldn't get the night off. Come on." But yeah, it's been a real treat. Just it's cool that it's big again. You know, like just everything happening now. I never imagined it. I never even thought of it.
It's funny. I mean, I have a 14-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son. So my 14-year-old daughter's kind of at that. No, I really don't want to go see Star Wars with you. I can live with that. I'm okay. She when The Force Awakens came out, she was at the prime age. She watched it. She'll come back. I know she will.
Oh, she will.
But it's interesting because of all the different doorways, and I talk a lot about how for my son, Clone Wars that's his Star Wars. His Luke, Leia, and Han are Fives, Rex, and Cody. Like those are his guys. And I've told this story a million times, but when we watched Clone Wars season 7, he watched some of the movies, but he never got into the movies. Like the movies were cool, they were good to have. It was but when Order 66 hit, it killed him. Like, I remember sitting next to him going, oh my God, I should have gotten him prepared for this, because he was just like, what is going on? So it's so cool that there's those different, there's not only different doorways, but there's also different, we all get our I'm your father moment. I literally had the I'm your father moment. You had moments watching the prequels, watching Anakin and Palpatine evolve, and Palpatine sort of expose what he really was, and that sort of thing. So it's fantastic that the stories kind of open the doors their own way.
Yeah, and that's one of my like I know we were speaking about those opinions people have, because there's so many opinions about the Star Wars fandom and all these movies, but I constantly remind people, like, you cannot be upset about this show not being adult enough, or things not happening the way you want it to happen, because you have to put yourself in the shoes of these 10-year-olds, these 8-year-olds. Think of yourself at that age and how magical it felt to experience all of this. And like I'm just constantly reminding people, like, yeah, this might seem a little, Mandalorian seemed a little not as adult or childish at times, and I'm like, it's not. There's so many ages to cover with every Star Wars feature you put out. So
it's really true. And one of the things, and it's I love hearing your story about going to see Star Wars with your father and family. And there's always, it seems every time I talk to somebody about their Star Wars experience, there is some sort of family relationship there. Talk to me a little bit about that evolution and getting into other fandoms, perhaps, with your family.
Yeah. So again, it was me and my dad all the time. And my mom was just the supportive mom who was like, okay, you like Harry Potter, you like this, I'll take you to the midnight book releases and stuff like that. And I'm so lucky that my parents sacrificed so much and just always put everything I was passionate about, like, first and foremost, and let me really get into those things, because it was pretty obvious to them that I was into things and not a lot of girls were at my age. And I was watching, Star Wars on repeat, Spider-Man, the Avengers, everything. I was reading Captain America comics around the same time I started reading Harry Potter, when I was, still like 10 years old. But yeah, just going to see those movies, I think having that experience in a theater was just it for me. That kind of sold it before I got to go to Comic-Cons. I had no idea what Comic-Con was. And my younger sister, she's 12 years younger than me. And that might seem like a big age gap. Now she's 18. But I got her so into Star Wars. And I know I said before, I was like, you're gonna like it, you don't have a choice. But she's kind of like your daughter in a way, where she's like, like a little not too cool for it, but was like, oh, I'm gonna do my own thing. And I'm like, okay, I'll be ready when you come back. And he came back, and we saw 2 out of the 3 movies in theaters together.
Nice.
And I think it's just like generational that has, made me more passionate about talking about it. And again, because there's just such good messages for women in the movies as well. And I also was a nanny briefly for like 8 years of my life. And I nannied a little girl. And you could ask her on age 4, her favorite princess wasn't Rapunzel or, Jasmine. It was Princess Leia. She had Princess Leia shirts, and we would literally look at a little Star Wars picture book I got her for Christmas. She could point out each person. She'd be like, Chewie, Han Solo, Millennium Falcon, and like these cute little kids' voices. And I think that's been cool, just like passing on the love for it. And I feel like you never really have to force it on anyone, because just the storylines and everything are just so beautiful.
Yeah, you keep that door open, and eventually we'll walk in. Is it? Yeah, you mentioned the storylines. What is it do you think it is about Star Wars that, I mean, it shouldn't be around? First of all, it should never have happened in the first place. I remember I read an article somewhere with Ralph McQuarrie, who, when he was doing the paintings for George, was like, this is not going to work. Like, this is cool, I love the idea, it's not good. But not only is it working, it's still, as you said, it's still relevant today. It's still, I mean, if you told me when I was 7, sitting in the back of my parents' station wagon, that when you're in your 50s, Star Wars is still going to be a thing, I would have been like, no way, but that would be cool.
And I feel like I also kind of went through that same thing, because I had it for such a short amount of time. And then I feel like that's what Star Wars is, they give you a little and then they take it back. And then you're like waiting for, like, when the Force Awakens trailer came out, I remember for like a year before that came out, there was these fake posters going around.
Uh,
I remember seeing one and I was like, oh my God, like I can't even think about that right now. And I'll never forget seeing that trailer in the theaters because I wasn't really like a big kind of up-to-date social media person, like in my, high school, college years. And I'll never forget when I saw that trailer and I didn't believe it. Like you said, like who would have thought that it would have came this far and they would have gave so much time and love and passion to this series. But yeah, it's really cool that it's still relevant and still pushing through with everything. But the storylines too, gosh, what do I love? I think I just love the idea of adventure, as a kid becoming an adult, figuring out my life, and just the idea. Space has always enthralled me. I've always been so excited to learn about that, and just how amazing these characters are and how they connect with each other. And again, the strong women, because I've read some books as well. And, it's just, there's so many different levels to it. I feel like once you start that surface level of Star Wars, when you become a fan, then you get more into it and read some conspiracies or breakdowns and opinions, and you choose to believe what you want to believe.
Right.
It becomes more deep. And I love kind of researching it still to this day. So
yeah. So as a big fan, and with all the content that we've gotten on Disney Plus and sort of the pause in the movies, do you think they run a risk? This is something that I'm sort of, as a lifetime fan, I always reference. It's so interesting. I reference my father as a fan. He's in his 70s, right? So he sees all the movies. He watches the live action shows. He's never watched a second of the animation. Do you think, and now you're also a Marvel fan and you're a DC fan, so you have the comic book experience and the movie experience that goes with that. Do you think Star Wars is at any sort of risk, or how do you think they're handling sort of melding these stories that are 2 or 3 levels deep, to bring like a Bo-Katan into their biggest property at the moment without her backstory? Or do you think they're handling it really well? I mean,
So that's such a tricky question. I think first and foremost, they're capitalizing on the fans and everybody like loving it right now. And I think that's genius. You kind of gotta keep going at it when it's hot, when people want to watch it. I do get that there is a huge gap of people that haven't watched animated. I mean, even in our audiences on the podcast, people in my life explaining the Clone Wars to people, even explaining Rebels, like it's so much information. It literally feels like you're taking like a college level class. You have to take notes, how they're all connected. And you really have to be like super, super into it to understand a lot of it now, I think. But going off of the new trilogy and a lot of the shows they have coming out now, my personal opinion would be that they kind of did it out of order. I would have loved to see Mandalorian before. I would have loved to see like Ahsoka before. I know live action series were not a big thing when the trilogy came out, so it was difficult. I think the Mandalorian came out at a perfect time as well, but I think the movies were a little rushed in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, I love them. I loved seeing Leia come back. I loved seeing Luke, even though that was tough to watch at times. I did love seeing him back. And of course Han Solo and the droids, everybody, but it's a tricky situation when you have, different audiences and different age groups not really wanting to watch an animated series. And I totally get that because I'm kind of on an opposite end. My dad was obsessed with the Clone Wars and I didn't take him seriously when it was coming out because I was like a senior in high school. I was going to college. I'm like, I'm not going to watch this cartoon.
Right.
And then I got into it like 4 seasons in. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it's just a lot. It's a lot to expect, I think, of an audience.
Yeah.
Just keep up to date with all of the lore. So.
Yeah. I think in a way, super fans like yourself and I, we end up slightly becoming almost sort of carriers of the information. Like I catch myself having to fill my dad in on, well, okay, so the reason she did this was because back in season 4 of the Clone Wars, this happened or that happened. But yeah, it's a bit of an interesting time. Do you think I just recently saw somebody that actually today there was a rumor that Taika Waititi's movie isn't going to happen, and of course these things come and go and up and down.
It's tough.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things to me is Star Wars, more than any other franchise, it seems to be under such a scrutiny. Like, people are waiting for these things to fail in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is every single major franchise has these same issues. You just don't hear about it all the time. But that being said, with the success of streaming, do you think Star Wars needs to get back in the theater, or do you think it can survive on the small screen?
So I loved how they did that Ahsoka premiere this past week in some of the theaters. I thought that was really, really cool. Sorry, I'm gonna plug in my charger really quick.
No problem.
Did not realize I was on low battery. That's like the thing too. It's like I feel like some of these shows they put out, Obi-Wan, some of the Mandalorian episodes, I really would have loved to see them in theaters too. And I think people take it a lot more serious if they're doing like a theater production and they have this whole premiere and things like that. I think honestly, the live action shows they have now are going to get more people excited for the movies.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are talking about a lot of these Star Wars live action series going on right now. And especially because it's tying in older generations of Star Wars and just the time period of when these shows are taking place. I feel like a lot of people are just kind of like tuning in now and being like, what are they going to do with this? Because you're going to see fan favorites from the original trilogy pop up, I think, very soon in some of these again. And I would love to see them in theaters. I hope they do like some of these, like a whole, I would stay there as long as I have to watch some of these series all the way through. The new trilogies do sound exciting though. I am really excited for the Mandoverse Filoni directed film. I think that's going to be great. I'm not too sure about the Taika one, but I don't know. I know a lot of people had opinions about Thor: Love and Thunder as well.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that might have a little bit of an impact on why people are kind of doubting that.
Yeah.
I love the guy. I think he's hilarious. Do I think he should do a Star Wars movie? Maybe with like a co-director, like somebody they're helping him, maybe like him and Filoni could have a good, back and forth on it. But I am really excited about it. I'm really excited to see where Rey's character is going to go. Because again, like the trilogy, the new movies they had come out, I feel like a bit rushed, and I feel like they could have done a lot more with the storylines. And they were probably scared too, because it's Star Wars coming back after how many years? Like, who's going to really be into it right now? And you're taking kind of a gamble. I totally get it. Big production, a lot of money. But now I feel like they have all the time in the world. They have the budget. They have the actors who really want to be a part of it, who really want to tell the story, and especially the directors too. So I think it's a bright future for the new trilogy. I think there's a lot of hope for it.
I like what you said before about you kind of wish like that it was in a different order, because I definitely feel that. But it's also interesting because I think the challenge is that the evolution of the way stories are being told. Like now, for example, like with Miss Marvel or the Marvels coming out, I feel like you had to have seen. Now again, I haven't seen the movie yet; nobody has, so I don't know. But I feel like it's very closely connected to the Disney Plus series, and that's cool. It's a risk, but it's cool. So.
And again, it's like it's one of those dark corners of fandom with Marvel too, seeing women characters kind of take on their own TV shows and movies. I feel like the only woman that's really had some type of success with Marvel has been the Scarlet Witch, the Black Widow kind of, but I feel like even then they had to force that movie onto people just because of COVID and delaying the movie coming out for so long. And even when it did come out, there's so many people have so many opinions about it, but it is really interesting the order they do with things, especially with that Miss Marvel. I did like the TV show.
Yeah,
I thought it was cute and fun, but a lot of the fans don't want cute and fun with event. They want the gritty action, and I don't know. It's that argument that I think is going to go on until the end of time, with Marvel.
And it's so interesting too, though, because it's the same argument with Star Wars, right? People forget that. I mean, I do hate to say that. Well, it's George Lucas said it's made for 12-year-olds. He actually did say that, and that actually is true. And a show like Andor, which has a completely different feel, works, but that's not all Star Wars. I think if all your Star Wars was Andor, I mean, I saw you guys did a trailer reaction to Rebel Moon, for example, which it's Zack Snyder doing Star Wars clearly, and it's gonna feel like Zack Snyder. And if that's your thing, I mean, I like some of his stuff. I don't love all of it, but I'm really curious to see what he does in that kind of a universe. But I'm glad he didn't get it as a Star Wars, because I feel like so my dad always says, like, does Jack is my son, he's like, does Jack like it? And Jack didn't love Andor. He like only got through 2 episodes and he was like, you know what, this isn't for me. So it doesn't make it a failure, but he could watch it. That's why I kind of look at it, like, he could watch it. I wouldn't feel bad if he watched it. He's probably not going to watch Rebel Moon.
Just random curveball and more space stuff,
Right.
I think Rebel Moon's going to be great. I do like that it isn't Star Wars. It is really interesting that he did pitch it to Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
As a Star Wars, like a mature Star Wars movie, which I think, again, everybody's been saying they kind of want something of that sorts. And I think they did that with Andor in a way. Rebel Moon's going to be great. I'm a big fan of Zack Snyder. He's a great director. But again, it's like, it's one of those, when you pick a director, they're going to do it in their style. Like with Doctor Strange 2, that was Sam Raimi.
Yeah.
A lot of people had opinions about that movie, Multiverse of Madness. It was very Sam Raimi. It was very classic, cheesy, horror-esque. But you know what you're getting into if you've seen Evil Dead or any of Sam Raimi's movies.
Oh, but that's the thing. Like, Raimi was the perfect pick for those movies because he had that sensibility, and and that's why I think that's why Force Awakens works, because whether you like J.J. Abrams or not, he's rebooted big franchises. He knows, the way I always put it, and maybe I'll get your reaction to this comment, because I always say that J.J. Abrams is a fan of Star Wars movies and Rian Johnson is a fan of Star Wars.
Yeah, I think Rian Johnson took the road less traveled.
Right.
And I respect it and I appreciate a lot of the things he did, but I don't think, again, the world was ready for that kind of movie.
Yep.
J.J. Abrams is more like, all right, big screen, everybody's going to watch this movie. Rian Johnson, has movies that are a little bit smaller. He's a big director, but I think at the end of the day, he doesn't necessarily care as much about like opinions of people. Not that J.J. Abrams does or doesn't, but he's kind of just like, this is how I see it. This is what you're going to get.
Right.
And I see both arguments, a lot of those movies were so different from each other that back to back was just like, is this the same series? But I did like both takes, but I think it is cool when it's another argument you can have on should Star Wars choose a director that everybody knows that has a certain style, or should they go, with, I think, some directors from the live action shows, they could really do a lot of good things with that. And what chances are they willing to take to see if people are going to like that director's style of Star Wars? Because you don't necessarily want to take their creative direction away from the movie just because it's a Star Wars film. So another interesting debate for sure.
Well, that's why I agree with you on Taika. I love Taika's stuff. The stuff, if it's a Taika movie, it's a Taika movie. And I don't know. I wonder, I mean, in a way, though, I'm kind of like, that would be kind of cool, though, to see what would he do with it. So.
Yeah, he can make like a very comedic, but also serious at the same time. I would love to see his kind of view of Star Wars. I kind of want to see him I feel like before they take a director to the big screen with the movies, they should have them do a couple live action shows first and then see how people respond, gain, Star Wars fans and the audience's trust a little bit,
right?
And then move them to like, a trilogy movie or have them like going onto that stuff. So
I think that's great. And they should absolutely use that testing ground as much as they can. So
totally.
All right, Kyra, we have something on the show we call the 10 question segment. And it's sort of like you ever watch Inside the Actor Studio?
I have, yes. Okay, that's an intense conversation.
Okay. They're not quite that intense. And they're Star Wars questions. And there's no wrong answers. I won't judge you, but the internet will. So
everybody can judge me. It's okay. We can have a conversation about it. It's all right.
Right. So give long answers, short answers, but let's if you're ready, let's get started. So What is your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book?
Like each one?
Oh, you can. Let's do each one. Let's do each one.
'Cause I'm ready for this. Not because, again, it's like when somebody asks you your favorite movie, what's your answer? You never know the movie you want to say.
Right.
Favorite movie, I am torn between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And that's mainly because I think I briefly explained at the beginning the Attack of the Clones experience I had in the theater, seeing that.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. That was one of the best movies I've ever seen in a theater. And Revenge of the Sith for sure. I just watching those two movies go back to back and seeing so much story be told in such a short amount of time, I think was just, it really hit hard for this 11-year-old, 12-year-old heart,
Yeah.
Favorite live act or favorite Star Wars series, like TV show?
Yeah.
That's tough. I really liked Obi-Wan. I really just love I'm a big Hayden Christensen fan.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been defending his acting and the prequels my whole life. That's another thing we would get a lot of comments on, or even when I was younger and I would be on like Twitter and stuff, and I'd be like, oh, the prequels were amazing. You guys are just haters. Like everybody hated on the prequels. That was a big part of this whole Star Wars.
And people forget that. People forget, like, the sequel haters have totally created this revisionist history of look, I was 28 or something when I saw the first prequel, and I remember because I brought all my baggage and I was like, it's not what I wanted. I've come to absolutely like I've said before, I'll throw on Phantom Menace and just, if I'm going to pick of the 9 movies, I'll pick Phantom Menace a lot more than I ever thought I would have in 1999. But yeah.
And I'm sure that's different with everybody's journey when you like saw what's your first Star Wars movie that you saw.
Sure.
And I think that's cool, and people can have conversations about it and just be like, hey, this is how I saw it. You saw it this way, but we're gonna shake on it, and now we love Hayden Christensen. And so Obi-Wan was just a lot for me because, again, like I just love the story of Anakin into Vader and then becoming good again. And I think that's such a deep conversation that I always love having because everybody just always hates on him. And don't get me wrong, the youngling scene will never sit right with me. That was horrible. That's the one thing I can't see eye to eye with him on. But live action, it's got to be like a tie between Obi-Wan, Andor, and now Ahsoka. Ahsoka honestly might be my favorite. I just want to wait till all the episodes are done because I really did love Andor. I think Rogue One isn't talked enough about as a Star Wars movie. It's often forgotten. A lot of people who like Star Wars don't even realize, at least like not super fans. A lot of like, I bartend still, and a lot of people that know Star Wars are like, what's Rogue One? You don't really know it. But Andor was really compelling. I did love that story as well. So yeah, it's a 3-way tie right now.
That's fair. That's fair.
But the Star Wars video games are good too. I don't know. Did you ever play Nintendo 64 at all?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Shadows of the Empire.
Yep. Yeah.
That was something me and my dad. Well, I didn't really play because I would get extreme anxiety, but he would play. He would play for hours, and I would watch him for hours. And I recently started there's YouTube live play of it now. Like, of course there is.
Oh, really? Yeah, I don't know why I'm surprised, but yes, I definitely.
They go through the whole thing, and the little kids I nannied for one day, it was like raining. They both love Star Wars, a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and we played. I put the YouTube on for them, Shadows of the Empire, and I gave them the controllers and made them think they were playing. We must have did that for a couple hours, but so many good Star Wars video games coming out too, and I'm really excited about that. So.
Yeah, I love that as a storytelling device. My first author interview was actually Steve Perry, who wrote Shadows of the Empire.
Wow.
When I had probably the very first Star Wars fan website back in like 1990, whatever that was, 6 or something. So I've been around too long, Kyra, a long freaking time. So the next question is, what is your favorite non-Star Wars movie?
That's a good question. Oh no, I'm gonna blank. I know this is just staring at me right now. I have this
the Dune poster.
I'm just gonna go with this for.
There you go.
I really love Dune. That's another sci-fi series I got into, and it was kind of because of Star Wars, because of the everything that was like kind of parallel with Star Wars and Dune. I do love the Dune movie. I recently saw Barbie. That was amazing. And horror movie. I'm just gonna go recent movies for here now because again, I'm horrible at answering that question. But horror movie Talk to Me was really, really good.
Oh, really? Okay, I haven't seen that.
Check that out. It might still be in theaters. I'm sure it's probably not going to be in a couple weeks, but it was like a short budget film in Australia. A24 acquired it after they won a couple festivals, and I think it came out in July. And that was one of the really good horror movies I've seen in a long time. So
cool.
It's great. Yeah.
I will check that out. All right, this question is specifically for you. I'm changing one of my questions because as a bartender,
yeah,
and as an Anakin Skywalker fan, what would Anakin order and what would Obi-Wan order if they came into your bar?
So depending on the day, if Obi-Wan's on a job, I think he would get like an NA beer. He would be like very like, soda water. Anakin would definitely do whiskey rocks or whiskey neat, also depending on the day. I also think if Obi-Wan was drinking, he would do something like a little bit more flamboyant. I think he would like maybe a daiquiri, something fun, maybe a vodka soda. I don't know if they're being basic, but yeah, I could definitely see Anakin, just give me like a double bourbon neat,
Right.
No ice at all. I just want to feel the pain.
I want to feel it burn down my throat. Just
Anakin would order the drink first, and then Obi-Wan would order his based off what Anakin orders to know how much he has to like help him. He's like, okay, I have to be the ice. Okay, like I have to get soda water.
Looks like I'm driving tonight.
Exactly.
That's funny. What is your favorite Star Wars sound effect?
Oof. So I have asthma.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see where this is going, but I've had asthma my whole life.
Right.
And I don't really ever talk about this, but when I do my breathing treatments when I was younger, when I was like really sick, or if I take my inhaler during the winter when I'm like kind of wheezy, it kind of sounds like Darth Vader doing the, so it might be the Darth Vader breathing. I love that. And my ringtone for the longest time was R2, like screaming.
Yeah.
That was like my text tone. So I really just love the droid sounds too. I love BB-8's little sounds and R2. Yeah.
Yeah. My son had the asthma mask, and he used to, every time he got sick, he had to wear the I can't think of what that was called.
It was a nebulizer. Or
nebulizer. That's it. Yeah. And we called him Little Vader, and
it made it cool again. I'm like, wow, this is great. I love asthma.
Sentences you don't hear too often on this podcast. I love asthma. Maybe we can get a sponsor as a result of that. Okay. So you just said you love droids. The next question is, who's your favorite droid? I know that's that's become a tougher and tougher question throughout the years.
They're all so good, and they've like given them more. I feel like C-3PO and R2-D2 obviously like paved the way.
Right.
And they had so much like spunk and sass, especially R2-D2, and I don't think people give them enough credit. I wish there was like a droid speaking class you could take. There probably is somewhere out there, because I would absolutely take that. I really in recent years love BB-8. I have a couple little BB-8s in my house. I have like a Christmas ornament that I keep in my kitchen all the time. And I had one of those robotic ones that just moves around. But I have a little dog who is appropriately named Han Solo. And he did not get along well with BB-8. So we had to put him on the shelf. But I really do love BB-8. I love Chopper. Seeing Chopper and Ahsoka has been incredible because he's like the sassiest, spunkiest of them all, I think.
Yes.
I like them all. That's a good question to answer.
I know these are tough questions. We just had Gary Whitta on, who wrote for Rogue One, and he wrote for a couple of Rebels episodes, and he told a little story about because when he wrote for Chopper, they actually wrote words for him. And then, so the actors could respond. And he said, if you read what we wrote for Chopper, you would not believe some of the things he is actually saying. So,
Oh man, I gotta get a hands on that script. That would be I gotta leak that one out one day.
Oh my god, yeah, it's gotta get out. So which Star Wars character would you most like to be and why?
Again, I know I keep referencing this show right now, but Ahsoka right now. I think watching her journey has been so inspirational to myself and so many other people. And seeing her, especially in these last episodes, kind of spoilers, but just kind of be a little bit lost and not really sure of what she's doing, kind of idling, going through life, blaming herself for a lot of things that happened during the Clone Wars, and just coming out almost on the other side. Some Gandalf, references here.
Sure.
So white, a lot of the internet is saying, which is so funny. But I just admire her so much as a character, as just being such a role model to so many people out there, men and women alike. And just the way she speaks up for what is right, and she's not afraid to. And that has gotten her in a lot of trouble over the years, but she still continued to do it. And I love her style. I love Rosario too as Ahsoka. I think it's the perfect casting, and it's just really cool. She's a really cool character to watch now. It's like, wow, live action.
It's wild to me because in 2008 when Clone Wars cartoon came out, the animated, cartoon, whatever. Hey, I can say it. I'll own it. I one of the reasons I didn't go to see it in the theaters was I was like, oh, what is this Sky Guy little girl thing? And the first tattoo I got was the Fulcrum logo, and she's one of my favorite characters now. So it's wild, and Dave Filoni as a writer he's starting to get the attention he deserves, but he's absolutely brilliant in building characters. And yeah, I could watch his stuff all day long.
All day long. I agree. And Filoni we trust. That's what
Filoni we trust. Yes.
We're like, let him do everything. We will sign our lives over to Filoni Favreau. We trust them.
I mean, he learned under George and he paid attention, which is great. You're a YouTuber, so you must have one of these. What's your Star Wars unpopular opinion?
Star Wars unpopular. Maybe the prequels that I think were amazing. I feel like it's not unpopular anymore, but that's the first thing I think of because I was always arguing that my whole life. I was always like, Jar Jar Binks isn't as bad as you guys make him out to be. Like the Gungans were really, really cool. It's like an underwater world. Like I feel like Darth Maul, I could go on and on about the prequels all day. I feel like that would be I'm going to stick with that unpopular opinion. I know it's not unpopular anymore, but it will always be unpopular in my heart. So.
But I think what's interesting is that it's not unpopular among the Star Wars circles in social media right now. But like I still talk to friends of mine who did not, continue to dive into their nerdiness, and they're like, "Oh, you like the prequels?" So I'm like, "No, you got to watch them again, dude. They are you're missing out." So I don't think you're wrong. I think it is an unpopular opinion broadly among the top of the bell curve. So that's fair. If you could own any spaceship or vehicle from the Star Wars universe, what would it be?
Oh, Millennium Falcon. 100%. I mean, I named my dog Solo for a reason. Solo always just felt like, the drunken uncle that everybody has in one family that's just cool in there, but I never had one that was as cool as him.
Yeah.
And I don't know, even as a kid, it wasn't that I was like, oh, because Harrison Ford, beautiful looking man, like so popular. I never was like attracted to him in that way. I was just like, he is just so cool and just does his own thing. And just some of the I would say some of the lines he says as a kid too to people, and people would be like, what the hell are you talking about? But definitely Millennium Falcon. That will always be.
So I'm gonna guess the Han Solo version versus the Lando version.
Yes. I do love Lando. That's a good debate to have as well.
Yeah.
That is a really good point. Definitely Han Solo version, but Chewie has to be on the Falcon too.
Yes.
Like that's the only way I'll accept it. Come with the Falcon.
It doesn't work without Chewie. I agree. I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
Coming down the home stretch, what is your favorite Star Wars moment from a film or TV show?
I'm looking back here because I've had this portrait, a friend who for me that's a tattoo artist, and I've been planning to get this tattoo forever. And it's one of my favorites. It's when Anakin tells Padme, love can't save you, only my new powers can. I love that moment. I know it's very tragic, it's very foreshadowing, but that always stuck with me as a kid. I will always love the battle on Mustafar. That's engraved in my mind forever. I think, does the whole Empire Strikes Back movie count? Front to back, that whole moment.
Yeah.
Gosh, again, so hard to pick. But yeah, you know what? I will go with the battle on Mustafar. Yeah. Little duel between them because that was so emotional and you're on edge and crying the whole time.
Yeah. So. I love hearing this perspective from a prequel first person, because everything you just said about the Battle of Mustafar was the way I felt about the Vader and Luke fight in Jedi. I mean, literally, that was where I learned what edge of your seat means, because I was 12 years old or whatever, and literally I was on the edge of my seat, like, do something, and it was just so great. But it's funny because that's, again, it's whatever Star Wars is your Star Wars, not as a gatekeeper, but what you entered in and what you carry with you, right?
Totally. Yeah. And it's cool. It's cool for people to have those different favorite moments, because I feel like obviously the prequels didn't necessarily mirror the originals, but I think they're all kind of mirrors of each other. I will add to when Luke in A New Hope is looking out to both sons. That is one of my favorite moments, I think, ever in the movie. Yeah, I tear up. I'm like, wow, there's hope for us yet. You know?
Yeah. And the music, that just like everything works perfectly. All right, so my last question on this list is, what is your go-to Star Wars quote?
Probably that one. Love can't save you, only my new powers can. I don't want to do the voice on here. It'll be so embarrassing. I ironically do a lot of Palpatine ones as like a joke to myself sometimes. I'm like, do it now, or like something funny like that, or I don't know. I feel like a lot of them are, more like moments with like Vader force choking people, and I'll just be like, oh, to my sister, or something like that. But I guess I don't really quote it a lot. May the force be with you as well. I feel like that's just something I put in a postscript on an email now. But sometimes I tell myself, okay, Kyra, like, be professional. Not everybody uses the force. But I would say probably May the Force be with you is probably the most used one, or some of those evil Palpatine ones when I'm telling my dog to chill out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Kyra, this has been a wonderful conversation. I have loved every minute of this. Where can people keep up with you and follow you on the old internet, and what's your channel?
So my personal everything is Kyra Bella X on Instagram, all of that, Twitter, all that good stuff. And then of course, YouTube, anywhere you can stream your podcast. We're on Audible, Spotify, Apple, I think iHeartRadio too, randomly. I don't really know how that happened, but we do get listeners from that. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Relatable Nerds. And some of them have 2 S's because somebody has the Relatable Nerds tagline on Instagram, but they don't even use it. We tried messaging them. We were like, we will pay you. Please give us this. But yeah, Relatable Nerd or Relatable Nerds with 1 S or 2 S's on all platforms. So
excellent. Well, great. Well, thank you. And I can't wait for us to finally be able to get Podathon going, because I can't wait to have you be a part of that. But thank you so much. This has been such a great time. I really appreciate it.
Alrighty. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Okay.